Okay, welcome back. We're going to do a Ceph Luminous install again, but this time we're going to go ahead and explain everything we're doing for beginners, for the truly beginners out there who are just trying to get into getting Ceph off the ground. They've never done it before, they've never seen it done, they don't know what's going on, they barely use Linux. So this is for you if you are a beginner in this space. And we're going to start with this. This is an installation of Ubuntu 16.04 with all the updates done, or at least close to all the updates. I have the last date when the updates were done. 0323 and it's a template, meaning that it's a install of Linux, and there's a launch script on there that does things like resize this disk. So its default is 12. If I increase this disk to 250, there's a script automatically that runs one time when it boots up that will resize the partition on there to be that 250. Okay, but before we even get to that point, we after the installation we need to prep the system so that it can install Ceph properly. And for that, there's a script that I run called Ceph Setup .sh. So, and this is what's inside. Okay. Typically, I will run this on hardware machines. We're using virtual machines just so that we can get past, all the physical limitations of requiring physical machines. But essentially, everything you need to know about what this script does, I'll cover. Okay, so initially everything's hashed out. If you see these hashes, that means it's not run. Depending on the install and where it's going, I will undo these and redo them depending on what needs to be done. There are some that are actually just notes. Okay, but typically, when you install a machine from images, or as I call them, flashes, they're all the same. So you have to do things to them to differentiate them. Okay, so in this case, it uses the interpreter bash, which is the standard shell for Ubuntu, and then it throws up on the screen to enter the new host name. You read that from the keyboard input, and then it does the actual change, and there's the description saying that that's where it stops. Here, it runs the command echo this particular string, and it adds it to T is the adder. This is a pipe. This sends text output from the shell into the next command. And the command here is T, which adds data to existing files. And saying just throw it into this file, this base. And resolve.conf is the resolve.conf in etc. Usually it looks like that, is a file, but there's a daemon that runs that lets network manager manage it dynamically, which is why we're going to this base instead. UFW is a firewall. It needs to be disabled for Ceph. Ceph is too chatty to have a stateful firewall enabled. Okay. Here we do a regeneration of SSH keys. Like I said, with flash images, you have the same data on every single machine, including your SSH private keys and public keys. We don't want those, so we're going to destroy them. And this command, rm, gets rid of them. Okay. Dpackage reconfigure will create new ones. So that's why I have those. But you see, again, these are all hashed out. They're not going to run because I have a script locally that already does most of this stuff on the template. This is where we finally get to the first thing that's important. User add cephd. And it creates the same home directory. Pardon me. It echoes a no password sudo capability into the sudo daemon, right, for that user. Okay, it echoes the password, so I don't have to type it in when it creates this user, into the change password application. That's basically it. So we're creating the ability to run sudo without a password for this user. Okay, that's it. And we're creating the user, obviously. Then we need to add the repo. Now, since Luminous, you don't actually need to add the repo to all the machines. You only need to add it to the machine from which you're installing Ceph Deploy. Ceph Deploy doesn't come automatically to the latest version. You install the repo, you do an apt-get update, apt-get install, ceph-deploy. It will install 2.0, which is the latest version as of the time of this recording. Here we go, an apt update. We're installing Python, okay, because you need Python for a lot of this stuff. Here we're going to get into system control changes, okay. We're setting the number of runnable processes to an insanely large number. That's the first thing we're doing. Process IDs, in other words. That's what PID stands for. We're setting the maximum number of connection tracking to, again, a really large number. Right? Net filter connection tracking, also a really large number. Network core read memory, maximum capability, which is, I think it's all powers of 260 million. So yeah, I think it's 24-bit. I don't remember. Read memory, write memory, same thing. Network core defaults. Same thing with TCP read memory, TCP write memory. Backlogs. Backlog is important. This is how much packets can be stored up before it starts dropping them. It's important to have a large one because, again, Ceph, very chatty, talks a lot over the network. And when you're transferring data at the same time, those control messages do need to get through. Congestion control, we set it to, I forgot what this stands for, but it's necessary. And you see it's all writing them to the same file. These double greater or less than, greater than. Double greater than signs are mean add to the existing file without overwriting the data. That's all that means. It means add it to the very last lines. And then there's some, I forgot what this stands for, RP filter. But I know there's a packet, something read packet filter, I think is what it is. We're basically setting it to a mode where it's just more conducive to that much network traffic. Down here, and I don't want to get too deep into this, this converts a DHCP address into a static address. That's all this does. This whole list here. Okay. You see it's pretty convoluted, but that's because the network stack for the way the networking is done is in Ubuntu is a little bit convoluted, but it basically gets to the point where it starts doing that. Now in this script, I haven't automated this yet, but it assumes the network card is ETH0. If it's not ETH0, these have to be changed to whatever it is. So, and that changes a lot now. It used to be default, everything was ETH0. That's what this script does. This script needs to be copied onto our template. So we're going to clone this template. We're going to use a linked clone, which we're going to delete later. Actually, no, I want to use a full clone for this. Yeah. We're going to call this Ceph Deploy. Right? And we're going to copy it to our... In here, I have Proxmox 2 and Proxmox 3. These are pools in Ceph. One pool is 2 copies, another pool is 3 copies. So this data I want to keep real safe is here. The data I just want to, have a little bit safer than on a single hard drive is here. So we're going to copy it here because I really don't care about this environment. So we're going to clone that. It's doing its bit. It copied the 2 gig disk. Now it's copying the bigger disk. I don't know how many of you have an attention span that will last as long as it'll take to go through this all step by step, but hopefully I can squeeze this into one video. I might have to do multiple takes. So if you see me starting on one thing and all of a sudden jump into something else, or the same thing, you know what happened. But right now we're doing that. Here's my live view of what's going on. Within my Ceph cluster, this is the Luminous cluster. I've upgraded my Jewel cluster since the last video. It was a pain in the butt, but I got it done. Actually didn't get it done. Quick story. The monitor's corrupted. I had to rebuild everything, but that's why we have backups. Right? That's why we have you should always have backups. I was able to save everything I needed to save and then trash it and build it again. I've also upgraded my version of Proxmox. From the last video, I think it was at like 4.3, and this one's now 5.1. There's some nice new features I like. Anyway, we're getting this guy going. We are using blue stores now. That's why there appears to be more OSDs. Instead of splitting off the small databases into the SSDs, I decided to just roll them into extra space. The blue store OSDs now take up a good chunk of space just for them self-management. So even though I have more OSDs, I actually have about the same space, give or take. All right, so that's done. So we're going to turn this on. So you see it's generating keys. This is part of that script that's already built in. I need to first things first. Let's actually do updates and upgrades. It'd be nice if you could get into that. Or did I lose internet connectivity? I don't know. No, I didn't lose internet connectivity. Okay, forget the update. Forget the updates and upgrades for now. We need to go to etc. We need to remove that file because that's the one that the startup script checks. Okay, so now we're going to go to the root. We're going to touch ceph setup.sh. And then we're going to nano. And the nice part about here, we just go open and get it here. Control A, copy. And we can't paste. Of course not. What are you thinking? 182. Oh, look at that. It's already been issued. Let's try it again. All right. Okay. What am I doing now? I'm just trying to get that Ceph setup script onto the machine. Okay, so that's basically what this is. Ignore all that key crap. You're not going to need to know it. This is not what I wanted. Boom. Okay. Save it. exit. So what have we done now? We have copied the put the data in the file there, and we've removed the file check for the startup script that rebuilds all the keys and crap. Okay, so that's all. And for those who want to know what is being done here, this is basically what's going on. It reconfigures the SSH keys. That's these two here. This expands the hard drive, and then it rechecks the size of the hard drive. Well, it changes. It runs the expands.commands, which is, it's actually a bunch of letters. Actually, it's the letters that you run in fdisk. So if I cat, which means show me, it spits out the insides of a file. It's this D for delete, new, partition, one, first partition, enter, write, quit. So that's what that does. And because they're key commands, you can actually send them into the program, which is what is done here. So it runs fdisk for the hard drive, which is VDA, and it's saying take the input from this file, which works out. And we check the partitions, check the size, and then it actually runs the resizer. Then it creates that run once finish, and the very first line of this that runs after the shell is check to see if that file exists. If it does, echo that, and that's it. Else, run all this crap. And then it finishes. So now that that's done, we have our Ceph setup script. We're going to shut down -H now. This guy's now off. We're going to convert this to template. And what convert to template does in Proxmox is that when you clone it, it will also change the necessary unique identifiers, such as the MAC address for the network card and the BIOS serial number and things like that. Well, the virtual BIOS. Yeah. Okay, so now that that's done, they're both templates. Now I can clone this. Okay. Real self-deploy, I guess. This I don't mind if it's a linked clone, because it's all part of the same group. Now, linked clones move much quicker. They're basically instantaneous. Now, when we turn this guy on, we will have the machine we want. These have different icons because, well, one's a deployment image and the other one is not. Okay. So now we are at the same place we were for the original Ceph Luminous installation video. This is where we started with creating a copy of the deploy image with the necessary files on it. Okay, so now we will run that Ceph setup script. You have to do it as root. Okay. It did the update for us. It's doing all the package installation. And the // in the beginning means from this path, run this file. Dot means current directory, and then / is obviously the delimiter there. Typically, Linux and the Linux shell will only run things when you type in the file name if it's in its search path. The local directory is usually never in the search path. That's why you have to, tabbing will show you the files available to you. So if I hit tab right now, with these 1,248 files, these are all the search path for the shell. These are all the commands I can actually run. But if I want to just see what the commands I can run here they are. Or the files located here. Here they are. So now that that's been run, I can actually install Ceph deploy. Right, and this is the piece of software that we will use to deploy Ceph to our other systems. We don't have any other systems. I don't know if I'm going to go through the full install yet, but I just wanted to get this going for you guys, so you can, those who are new to Linux and storage and Ceph and just want to get a working system going and are just confused about what's going on. I'm trying to do this as slowly and as thorough as possible. So now that we know there's a Ceph D user on this guy, I can actually log in locally as Ceph D here, right? And that fast pass will get me there. Okay, so now if I type sudo test, it didn't complain, it just did it. Okay, so we know that the passwordless sudo works. In fact, sudo su, sudo stands for super user do, right? And then su is a binary that just gives you root. So you're saying, as super user, give me root, and that's what that does. Typically in Debian slash Ubuntu, I should say, root doesn't have a password, and you can't log in as it, but you can gain access if you're a sudoer, someone in the sudoers list. Okay, you can make root accessible by editing a file and then changing the root password. I'm not going to get into that, but the point is that's how that goes. So we're back here. So now you don't run the Ceph deploy as root, okay? You can, but you shouldn't. So what I typically do is I will make a folder called deploy, or the name of the business you're at, whatever you wanna do, and I will run Ceph deploy from here. Okay, and what that does is it creates all the files for configuring the cluster, for bootstrapping everything. It'll create them in here, so you can back them up. It's very important to back up your deployment machine if you're using your Ceph deploy. If you're doing things manually, that's different. But if you're listening to this, you're not doing things manually. You are installing with the easiest way you can. But before we can go on to start our new cluster, right, we have to know our certain parameters. We have to know how many machines we have physically, what their crush map is. Now with my installs, I usually show a default crush map. I don't know what your physical setup is, but for any new person, chances are your servers are all going to be on the same power connection. They're all going to be on the same network connection. You're not going to have independent networks and things like that. There's nothing complex to worry about if you need help installing Ceph. If you know how to install Ceph, chances are you know how to do all the rest of that stuff. So we're not going to cover it. But because the home installer needs to be able to do certain things, I'm going to try to cover as much as what I think is pertinent as possible. So back to the reason why we run this as user, we have to now tell this machine when we SSH to another machine, because that's the way Ceph deploy works, it SSHs, to automatically use a specific user and password, right? So how do we do that? Well, we go into a folder called .ssh. It doesn't exist. New users who've never used SSH will not have an SSH configuration file. So you can make that folder. That's not a problem. mkdir stands for make directory, SSH. The dot in front just means the file's hidden. No big deal. And if you type in ls-la, it will show you what all that stuff. So there's .ssh in blue. So if we go to .ssh, here we can make a file called config. What config does is it tells SSH how to handle specific hosts. So if I type in host, right, space, and then I give it a name, Ceph Mon 01, right? I press enter, I tab over user Ceph D, which is the user the script creates. And then here I type in host name, and then typically it would be the same, though I believe you can also use IP addresses. I'm not sure. We're going to try using IP addresses. We're going to do 10.25.0. When we create that, we're going to do what? Start at let's say 205. Okay. So I'm going to save this now. And I'm going to clone this template again. We're going to call this Ceph Mon 01. So this is going to be the monitor we're creating. Okay. Let's get that guy turned on. While this guy's booting up and getting ready, we know that we're going to set this IP address to 205 because that's what we told our config to do. But how are we going to SSH without a password? That's the question. We have to copy a key over. Okay. So for that, it's easy. SSH key gen. It will create for us a key. Now you can save it under a new file name, but I don't recommend you do that. Standard ID RSA is fine. Enter. You can enter a password to sort of lock this file. We don't really want to do that. We're just going to press enter to that. And it generates our 2048-bit key. This is the key we're going to copy to these machines to make them log in without a password. So for now, we're just going to log into... This is the Mon 01. This is the machine that we created that's going to be on IP address 205. So here we're going to do host name control set host name Ceph Mon 01. And that changes the host name of the system. We also need to do that in hosts. Silly me. Mon 01. And now when we reboot this guy, it'll have the proper host name. But before we reboot, let's go to network/nano interfaces. So we're going to tell this guy we don't want DHCP. We want static. Address, I think that's probably self-explanatory. 10.25.0.205, as we said. Net mask is the subnet. Okay, gateway 10.25.0.1. DNS name servers, that's also pretty self-explanatory. In the launch script I showed you, it used to send a 8888 to the base. Resolve conf base. This basically bypasses all of that. This command just tells it to use this as the default name server. That's the one I have here, so that'll work out there. What else do I need to do to this guy? It should have the Ceph setup script, which I should run, which will create that Ceph user for me and regenerate its SSH keys so they're not the same as the deploy machine. So that's what I've just did. So like I said, we're trying to unpack this, trying to get this as well explained as possible so that there's no confusion going on. Most of the stuff on the screen you don't even have to look at. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just telling you debug output. It's just saying, hey, I did this, I did this, I did that. Don't let it confuse you. I mean, it's helpful to be able to understand what versions of stuff you're using. Okay, so that is done. So now I can actually reboot this guy. So I didn't show you how to actually install Ubuntu. I hope you can get through that part on your own, the Ubuntu server. It's not a very demanding installation. You should be able to hold your own on that one. Okay. So it's done doing its thing. So now we are going to copy that key. So we generated a key here. We need to copy it here so that we can log in without a password. So the way we do that is SSH, right? Copy ID. And we already have one. It's in the default location, so it knows to use that one. And we're just going to say cephd at, the at sign is important. And we're going to type in the system name, which is in the config file that we just edited. So it knows, actually we don't even have to do that. We just do cephmon01 because it knows that we want to use cephd. Okay. We're going to say yes. Right. So it knew that we wanted cephd from what was in our config, and it knows that cephmon01 is this IP address. Okay, and then all we have to do now is enter a functioning password, and it will copy the ID. Oops, I should probably type it incorrectly. Butterfingers. Okay, what did I do wrong here? Now that's interesting. It works here. Let's try it manually. Now that's interesting. I don't know why this isn't working. It might be due to the fact that I don't have this guy set up in the host file. So if I 10.25.0205 cephmon01, let's see if that does it. Okay. Have to troubleshoot while I'm recording a live video. Look at that. Let's do user because I know that that one works. So no passwords are working now, for whatever reason. That's very interesting. Is 205 a used IP address? Son of a gun. We used a used IP address. My mistake. We're going to have to make some changes. We're going to stay away from the 200s. We're going to go to 180, 165. We'll do 165. I know that's not in use. Okay. Egg on my face. My apologies, guys. Should be more professional than this. 165. There are certain systems which are secure on my and I don't want them to come up, which is why I don't show you the contents of the other hosts, but sometimes crap happens. Okay, we're going to try this again. Okay. That. Yes. Okay. That worked. Beautiful. Tells us the key was added. So now if we just type SSH, excuse me, Ceph Mon 01, it will just log in. Now you notice that there's a lack of the bash shell. That's just the way we installed the user. If we sudo su, we can actually add a bash shell to the user. Oops, don't want to change that. By just see where it says /bin bash. So we would just enter that same thing right here at the end, and we could actually do that. So if we exit, and did it again, we would get a bash shell. It's not necessary. The commands all work without it, but you can do that if you'd like. But now we know that one is working. Oops, I locked completely out. So we're going to go back to the deploy. So now at this point, the Ceph deploy install will work, right? So if we do Ceph deploy new, Ceph Mon 01. Okay, so that's one of our first commands from Ceph deploy. Ceph deploy new means we're creating a new cluster. Ceph Mon 01 is the monitor. So if we were creating more than one monitor, we would list them all here. Ceph Mon 02, 03, 04, 05. You want an odd number greater than 1. I do it with 1 for demonstration purposes. If the monitor goes down, it's done. Your cluster doesn't work. The monitor in this case is kind of a misnomer. What the monitors actually do is they keep a map of the storage of the environment. Okay? So the way Ceph works is the Ceph clients send data directly to the OSDs. Okay? The object storage daemons actually handle that directly. Now, the way the client knows which OSD to talk to for reads and writes is via the maps that are provided by the monitors. The monitors also provide security, logging in, keys, and such. So the monitors are very crucial to the way it works. Okay, but because the map is handed off to the client, they're not crucial for reads, right? In other words, once I log in and I have my map and need to do a read, I don't have to talk to the monitor for that. If I do a write, however, I write to the OSD. The map on the monitor has to be updated. Okay, so that's the reason why you need your monitor, and it needs to always work properly. So the first thing we do when we run this program is it's going to run all this out. It checks the system, right? It creates a bootstrap file, making sure passwordless SSH succeeds, connects to the host, shows the name, runs the command, connection needed for sudo. So it's checking the system just to make sure everything is good. Everything is fine according to this. So it's done. The files we need are here. Cephmon keyring right there, and the Ceph conf. The Ceph conf now is editable for you. There are things you can put in here, such as cluster network and public network, which I think, hold on. Come on, okay. It kicked me out. In my case, you see that I have public network and cluster network and mon allow pool delete. In the Luminous, it won't let you delete pools unless you specify them. Okay, so this just tells you the networks that are allowed. Now, interesting side note, right? If you specify these networks, public and cluster network in here, once the configuration files are copied, the Ceph deploy will not work unless they're on that network. Okay? The Ceph deploy needs to be on that network for it to communicate further, to get everything going. It's weird, but afterward, after you get all your cluster set up and everything like that, you can then connect to a third system. So if I copy this, if I copy this data to a virtual machine, which I've done, right, I can actually administer my whole cluster. But in terms of logging in, it can't log in unless it's on that network. It would just will not accept those logins. It's very interesting that way. Anyway, let's get back to our showing what's going on here. So now that you know that there are things you can add, you can just Google, Ceph conf variables, and it'll tell you. Do not change this IP address ever. It does not work properly. Just don't do it. Okay, you're better off adding new monitors and then decommissioning old ones than you are trying to change IP addresses. It's just a warning to everybody who does that. Okay, so now that we've got that set up, we can now do Ceph deploy, install from the other video, -- release Luminous. Because if you don't type in release Luminous, it'll install Joule as of this publishing of the video. And then you just type in the system. It will do its bit. It will add the repo. I think it adds it right here somewhere. And then it will install the Luminous software. I'm not going to go to the OSD portion because it's more of this, the installation and the command to install OSDs, all of which is available in the other video. I'm just trying to explain the unexplained parts. The nice thing about Ceph deploy is it will show you the commands it uses to do certain things, like add OSDs, and you can actually run those commands on the individual hosts and achieve the same effect. So you can script, and I do this for large installations. If you have identical hardware, large installations, you can actually put a script that will add all the OSDs on like a shared NFS server, pull it down locally, and then run it for it to add all the hard drives as OSDs. across the board, so you don't have to sit there and start typing, hacking away at the keyboard. Dev SDA, SDB, SDC, so on and so forth. We're just going to let this go. This is taking forever. Maybe I can cut this out of the video. I don't know. Depends on how motivated I am. We like setting up. Setting up means it's wrapping it up. So I hope I explained all the beginning steps of this properly. As usual, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer them. I usually answer every question posted to me on my YouTube channel. We're pretty much done here. Like from this point, if you watch the original full Luminous install from scratch, you should be able to follow along and do all of that. Everything you need to know is there from here on out. So again, if you need any help with anything, please post your questions. I'll be happy to get to them. And have a wonderful day. And I hope your Ceph cluster is fast and great. Have a good one, guys.